So the paper that I published in Review of Social Economy, which is titled Care Labor, Intergenerational Equity, and Social Sustainability. Actually, the idea behind this paper started when I spent 2 years as the gender advisor at the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA. One thing I noticed was that the UN always had the 3 pillars of sustainability: social, environmental, and economic, were always repeated, but that there wasn't much interrogation of the social aspect of the sustainability pillars. And I became very interested in exploring the social pillar, given that I work a lot on care labor. So the paper basically provides an exploration of what has the literature said about social sustainability, and then I propose using the lens of care labor to look at social sustainability, and particularly thinking about how care labor is so important to intergenerational well-being, which I think is a component of sustainability. And in that paper, I also build off of some work by Diane Elson, who came up with the idea of the 3 R's: recognition, reduction, and redistribution, for addressing care labor. And I argued that we actually need 5 R's: recognition, reduction, redistribution, reinforcement, and reward, to make sure that we have a socially sustainable society where care labor is adequately supported. In addition to sustainability being one of the pillars of the United Nations agreement, with the Sustainable Development Goals being key to thinking about how we're going to move forward, gender equality is another pillar that the UN says that they really support. And yet we've faced a lot of struggles globally in terms of achieving gender equality. And feminist economists have for a long time been arguing that part of the problem with gender equality is that so much of what women do is unpaid and is care labor, which is fundamental to the functioning of economies, but doesn't have any value because it doesn't go through markets. So this paper really explores in detail the policy priorities that we should be thinking about in thinking about addressing care labor. I also am very cognizant that in addition to a lot of unpaid care labor, women are also the primary providers of paid labor, and they're often receive very low compensation for that. So women who are in the childcare sector, women who are in the elder care sector, women who are cleaning people's houses, this is all a component of care labor, which is undervalued. So I think one of the important things about the paper is it really explores in concrete ways how to rethink policy in a way that supports care labor better. Another contribution I think that's really important is I really try to also think about the connections between care labor and the environmental pillar of the sustainability platform. And so I look at the intersection between social sustainability and environmental sustainability, and I argue that sometimes these are complementary and sometimes they're conflicting. So policymakers are going to have to think about trade-offs that are involved when you're trying to both address gender equality and address environmental well-being. How are we going to negotiate that balance? Because sometimes you can't do everything that you want to do in the policy arena. So that's another area that I think this paper adds to our knowledge. One of the things I think that as I was finalizing this paper, COVID-19 began, and that really shifted the way we think about care labor. It really brought care labor into central focus. And so I think it was actually good timing that this paper came out right as COVID was affecting the global population. I do think that a lot more thought needs to go into better supporting women. They were really hit hard by COVID. In terms of my own work, I've actually moved on to some other work focusing on refugees, and I'm doing some work around the Syria crisis and gender. So the two areas of work that I'm moving into are continuing to think about social sustainability, continuing to think about care labor in terms of theoretical terms, but also some empirical work that looks at the refugee crisis and looks at how refugees are really trapped in a world where we prioritize nation states as the primary way that people gain rights and economic opportunities. And refugees are not under the care of a nation state. And so that puts them in a particularly precarious situation. And we now have a number of refugee crises that have been stretching on for many years, and the world community doesn't really know how to deal with that. So that's where my work has pivoted since writing this paper.